There is a specific moment that exposes a foundational error in modern thinking. It arrives after someone achieves the goal they spent years building. The promotion comes through. The income reaches the target. The relationship is secured. For a brief interval, something resembling satisfaction enters the nervous system. Then, before the week ends, it dissolves. The emptiness returns, more confusing than before. Most people respond by immediately setting a larger goal. They tell themselves the problem was the scale of the last achievement. The next milestone will finally be sufficient, but it never is. This cycle is not a personal weakness or a failure of ambition. It is evidence of a structural error embedded in the operating assumptions of modern life. The error is the belief that success, money, and pleasure are the correct targets for a human life. The man who diagnosed this error most precisely was a Viennese psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl. He reached his conclusions through clinical practice, decades of patient work, and 3 years inside conditions of total deprivation. His findings reveal why the goals most people dedicate their lives to are structurally incapable of delivering what they promise. Modern civilization operates on an unspoken psychological contract. The contract states that effort produces achievement, and achievement produces happiness. Work hard enough, earn money, buy comfort, and arrive at fulfillment. This formula is embedded in every motivational system and lifestyle advertisement. It is the operating assumption behind most decisions about time and priorities. The logic appears sound, but the formula has a fundamental flaw. Harvard lecturer Tal Ben-Shahar identified a specific psychological phenomenon he called the arrival fallacy. The arrival fallacy is the false conviction that reaching a destination will produce lasting fulfillment. Ben-Shahar observed this pattern in his own career and in the students around him. Many had spent years pursuing admission to elite universities. When the acceptance letter arrived, the anticipated relief lasted less than a week. The brain did not register the achievement as a permanent resolution. It relocated the expectation of fulfillment to the next available milestone. The arrival fallacy operates identically at every level of achievement. A professional earns a promotion and expects relief. Instead, new pressures arrive, a new comparison group appears, and a new ceiling becomes visible. The finish line advances as soon as it is crossed. The mechanism of hedonic adaptation ensures that achievement cannot produce lasting fulfillment. The brain assimilates every new level of success as the new baseline. What was once extraordinary becomes ordinary within weeks. The dopamine circuit that motivated the pursuit closes when the goal is reached. The brain then scans for the next available target. The treadmill accelerates, and the runner, however successful, never actually arrives anywhere. Before the Nazi regime destroyed his world, Frankl practiced psychiatry in Vienna. He directed a major program for suicidal and severely depressed patients, and thousands passed through his care across the 1930s. This exposure gave him unusual access to the psychology of human crisis. What he observed troubled him deeply. Many of his most severely depressed patients were not failures. Some were professionals with stable careers and comfortable lives. They had satisfied the requirements of the modern formula. Sufficient money had been earned, adequate pleasure secured, and a recognized level of success achieved. Yet their interior lives were evacuated and purposeless. Their circumstances could not explain the emptiness. Frankl traced this to the foundational models of his era. Sigmund Freud had proposed that the primary human drive was the will to pleasure, behavior organized around reducing tension and maximizing satisfaction. Alfred Adler challenged this, arguing the primary drive was the will to power, the desire for status, control, and dominance over the environment. Frankl studied both frameworks and found them clinically incomplete. He proposed a third framework built around a deeper force. He called it the will to meaning. This is not a philosophical preference. It is a psychological necessity. As fundamental as food or rest, when the will to meaning is denied or frustrated, a specific condition emerges. Frankl called it the existential vacuum. The existential vacuum is characterized by pervasive inner emptiness and purposelessness. Its primary symptom is not pain. It is boredom. Not ordinary boredom, but a structural boredom that no external activity can resolve. The existential vacuum does not respond to entertainment, achievement, or pleasure. It responds only to meaning. Modern neuroscience has since provided a biological architecture for Frankl's observations. The explanation begins with dopamine and the brain's reward prediction system. When you pursue a goal, your brain releases dopamine in anticipation of the reward. Dopamine is widely mischaracterized as the pleasure chemical. This is scientifically inaccurate. Neuroscientist Kent Berridge of the University of Michigan demonstrated that dopamine is not the experience of pleasure. Dopamine is the experience of wanting. It is released in the pursuit, not in the arrival. When you achieve your goal, the dopamine circuit closes. The wanting terminates because the target has been secured. A separate system briefly produces a transient sense of satisfaction, but it deactivates quickly. Evolution did not reward prolonged contentment. It rewarded continued pursuit. The brain calibrates toward a new target. Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell documented this recalibration in their foundational 1971 paper. They studied lottery winners who received large financial windfalls. The researchers expected elevated happiness levels months after the win. The results were stark. Lottery winners showed no significant long-term increase in reported happiness. Within 6 months, their well-being had returned to its personal baseline. They had also lost sensitivity to ordinary pleasures. The extraordinary had recalibrated their response to the everyday. If an unexpected windfall produces no lasting psychological benefit, then smaller financial goals will not produce one either. Money and success operate inside the hedonic adaptation system, not outside it. Raising the baseline raises only the threshold at which the next gain becomes necessary. The system compounds, and the meaning deficit it was masking remains untouched. If money and success cannot produce meaning, why do people dedicate entire lives to their pursuit? Frankl's framework provides a precise answer. When the will to meaning is inaccessible, human beings reach for the nearest available substitute. Success is an extraordinarily effective short-term substitute for meaning. It provides structure, identity, and external validation. Your career gives you a role, a defined set of daily tasks, and a measurement system for progress. Each achievement produces temporary relief from the deeper existential question. You do not need to ask what your life means when your calendar is saturated. The busyness itself becomes the answer. But Frankl identified a critical vulnerability inside this strategy. He called it the Sunday neurosis. This is the depression that arrives when external demands temporarily stop. During a structured workweek, the existential vacuum remains covered by the noise of meetings and obligations. When that occupation ceases on a quiet Sunday, the inner silence becomes audible. Many of the most successful people in the world describe this experience. They anticipate long holidays as relief. What arrives is the sound of their own emptiness. They respond by checking work obsessively or scheduling activities to fill the silence. If you want to understand human psychology through research rather than motivation, consider subscribing to this channel. We analyze peer-reviewed evidence to explain what drives human behavior at its deepest level. Frankl observed 2 primary cultural strategies for escaping the vacuum entirely. The first is conformism. Absorb yourself into the behavior of the majority and defer the question of personal meaning to the group's default answers. The second is the totalitarianism of work. Invest so deeply in professional achievement that the existential question never finds an opening. Both strategies function temporarily. Both require an escalating investment over time. The vacuum does not dissolve. It deepens behind the scaffolding that conceals it. The evidence for Frankl's thesis arrives from two extreme directions. The first comes from the heights of material success. The second comes from conditions of total deprivation. Consider the pattern that emerges from high-level entrepreneurial acquisitions. An entrepreneur spends years under conditions of acute pressure and defined purpose. The company represents their identity, their mission, and their daily justification for existence. Then the acquisition closes, and the financial reward arrives. Within 6 months, a significant proportion report clinical symptoms of depression. This pattern has a clinical designation, post-achievement depression. It is not caused by failure. It is caused by the removal of the meaningful resistance that the struggle was providing. The success dissolved the structure that was generating purpose. Now consider the opposite extreme. Frankl documented the psychological patterns of prisoners inside the Nazi concentration camps. Every conventional source of happiness had been destroyed. Starvation, disease, and arbitrary violence defined daily existence. Yet certain individuals maintained extraordinary psychological resilience. They were not necessarily stronger or younger. The variable that consistently predicted their endurance was the presence of a future-oriented meaning. A prisoner who held a manuscript in his mind and believed he would complete it maintained his psychological structure. A prisoner who carried the mental image of a specific person he was committed to returning to kept his will to live. Meaning proved more durable than comfort. Purpose outlasted pleasure. The will to meaning sustained human endurance in conditions where material success had become entirely irrelevant. Frankl was not simply diagnosing a problem. He mapped 3 specific pathways through which a human being could access genuine meaning. These pathways do not require success, money, or pleasure. They require only a genuine orientation toward the world beyond the self. The first pathway is what Frankl called creative values. This is meaning discovered through what you give or contribute to the world. A creative value is activated when you create something, build something, or perform a deed with genuine attention and care. It does not require that your creation receive wide recognition or financial compensation. A surgeon performing a complex procedure with complete focus is accessing creative values. A craftsman finishing a piece of furniture to a standard no one else will notice is accessing them as well. The measure of creative meaning is not the size of the audience. It is the depth of the engagement. The second pathway is what Frankl called experiential values. This is meaning found through what you receive from the world. Love, beauty, truth, and genuine human connection are experiential values. When you allow yourself to be fully present to another person and experience them as they actually are, you access meaning. When you stand before a landscape and let its scale reach you, you access it. Experiential values require attention and genuine receptivity. They cannot be purchased or scheduled. They are available at every economic level and in any set of circumstances. They do not require success as a prerequisite. The third pathway is what Frankl called attitudinal values. He considered this the most significant of the 3 and the most frequently overlooked. Attitudinal values are the meaning found in the stance you take toward unavoidable suffering. When a person faces a painful circumstance they cannot change, they retain an irreducible freedom. They retain the freedom to choose how they will bear it. Frankl argued that this choice carries meaning in itself. A person who faces illness with clarity and dignity is not merely enduring. They are creating meaning through their attitude. These 3 pathways share one critical structural feature. They are all directed outward toward the world beyond the self. Meaning is not manufactured through introspection. It is discovered through engagement with something outside it. This outward orientation is the foundation of the concept Frankl placed at the center of his system. He called it self-transcendence. He argued that the human being is not a closed system seeking internal equilibrium. The human being is oriented toward the world, toward other people, and toward causes that exceed individual comfort. Frankl made a precise clinical observation about self-transcendence. Patients who focused directly on achieving happiness and self-actualization rarely achieved either. The direct pursuit of the goal interfered with the conditions required to reach it. But patients who lost themselves in a cause they considered genuinely important, or in a relationship they felt responsible for, frequently reported deep satisfaction as a consequence. The fulfillment was not the target. It was the byproduct of forgetting the target. This is the central paradox of Frankl's system. The more precisely you aim at happiness, the more reliably it recedes. The more completely you surrender your attention to something beyond yourself, the more naturally fulfillment arrives. This paradox exposes a structural flaw at the heart of modern self-improvement culture. That culture is organized around techniques for optimizing your own psychological state. Its systems direct your attention inward. They treat the self as the primary subject of improvement. Frankl's system points in precisely the opposite direction. The self is not the destination. The self is the instrument through which engagement with the world becomes possible. Directing full attention toward the instrument while neglecting what it is an instrument for is the precise error that modern self-help culture has institutionalized. At the beginning of this analysis, we examined the moment when achievement reveals its emptiness. That moment is not evidence of failure. It is a signal from the will to meaning communicating that its actual demand has not been addressed. Success, money, and pleasure are not inherently destructive. They are neutral. They can coexist with a meaningful life, or they can substitute for one. The determining factor is the orientation from which they are pursued. If success is pursued as the central goal of a life, it will eventually expose its own insufficiency. If success emerges as a consequence of meaningful work, it will carry a very different weight when it arrives. Viktor Frankl returned from the concentration camps having lost everything. His wife had been murdered. His parents were gone. His manuscript had been destroyed. He returned to a ruined city with nothing but the ideas his experience had confirmed. He rebuilt by dedicating his life outward. He wrote, lectured, and treated patients for another 50 years. He did not find meaning because his conditions improved. He found it because he organized his life around something the conditions could not reach. The next time your achievements feel hollow, do not seek a larger achievement. Ask what specific task is waiting for your attention. Ask what relationship needs genuine care. Ask what unavoidable difficulty you can face today with a deliberate attitude. The meaning you are searching for is not inside you. It is waiting for you in the world.